Hello all. Given it's Halloween, I thought I'd talk about some of my favourite horror films. I've been a massive horror fan ever since I can remember. When I was younger, BBC Two had a whole series of horror films going right from the old Universal films through to some weird 70s films, all the Hammer horrors, and I've been hooked ever since. This is going to be a stream of consciousness, so I'm just going to be talking. I'll start off with Trick or Treat from the 80s. This is just a stupid horror film. I just enjoy it. It kind of invokes the satanic panic surrounding heavy metal of that time. It's about a young lad whose rock hero dies and he brings him back to life by playing his last record backwards. Much fun and some great music ensues. It's like a darker edged Goonies type horror in that it's a fun horror. Out of Romero's trilogy, I think I would pick Dawn of the Dead as being my favourite. A shout out to Snyder's version as well, because that's just a fun film. This is the sequel to Night of the Living Dead, and it's about a group of survivors who literally go to a shopping mall to try and survive, try and eke out some existence. But I think I like Dawn more because it doesn't have the kind of heavy claustrophobic nature of the first, and it doesn't have the nihilism and hopelessness of the last one. It has a mixture of the two, as well as some absurdity. We all know it's a commentary on capitalism, but it's interesting in the way it shows hopelessness. We're used to The Walking Dead and everything's kind of morose, but in this, it's almost a hysteria. It goes to ridiculous levels. There's been comments made about the man who keeps his arm in a blood pressure check whilst he's being attacked by zombies. It's absurd, it's ridiculous, and I guess that would be a commentary on the way people will respond differently to different situations. Some people in that situation would just go morose. Some people would just go, I don't care, I'm going to do what hell I like. And this features both of those. And it also reflects on the fact that existing isn't enough. Just surviving isn't sustainable. And it also has a glimmer of hope at the end. I nearly forgot to mention the amazing makeup effects by the legend Tom Savini. They're just incredible. Staying on the zombies, Return of the Living Dead. Kind of a sequel at heart. It refers to what happened in Night of the Living Dead as if it was a made-up version of it. The bodies, which were experimented upon by the government, being discovered, and a group of kids trying to survive when the dead start rising. I just love this film. It was one of the horror films I first watched when I had a VHS recorder back in the day. Yes, I'm that old. It's just so funny, so many great lines, but at the same time being a proper horror with some real gruesome special effects. Great music, absolutely great soundtrack. And something I used to really enjoy at the time was a horror film with a dark ending. I didn't want my horror films to always have that, oh, the hero wins out at the end. This one has an incredibly dark, nihilistic ending. I guess that then leads into Evil Dead 2. It's your classic Cabin in the Woods film. Literally the classic Cabin in the Woods film. Ash takes his girlfriend for a romantic weekend, accidentally reads from the Book of the Dead, or plays a tape recording, I think, and raises the demons. This was again one of the first VHS films I watched. And I remember starting to watch it, thinking to myself, I'm not sure I can carry on watching this. The beginning with the steady cam movement through the woods, it really got me on edge. And then it just became this massive and hilarious roller coaster ride with amazing visuals and practical effects and just so funny. You have such appalling scenes. There's a scene when he's chopping his own hand off, screaming, "Who's laughing now?" The absurdity of it is just brilliant. Just a good time. Just a fun, gory and violent thrill ride. Oddly, I watched that one before I watched the first Evil Dead, and it's quite difficult to watch the first one after you watch the second and take it seriously. So let's go on to Poltergeist next. This is kind of more of an adventure horror. Whether you'd consider it horror, I don't know, but I'm putting it in there. Poltergeist is the story of a family whose home becomes infested and whose daughter becomes the target of a malevolent force, and she's dragged into limbo, and the family have to try and get her back and deal with the haunting. I haven't really got anything deep and meaningful to say about this film. It's just a fun ride. Obviously some of the effects don't hold up very well, specifically the face melting set, which very much looks like a Muppet, and I don't think it ever didn't look like a Muppet. I don't think even at the time it was a particularly good scene. It's just full of so many great ideas and so imaginative, as many of those films of that time were. It comes at things from a different angle. And obviously we all know about the tragedies that followed. Just a fun, exciting, thrilling film. A bit of a change of pace, maybe, not sure. That's Fright Night. Story of a boy who believes a vampire has moved in next door, and it has. It's a fun film of a lad not being believed. It's the Jaws, the shark in the water scenario. He knows what's happening, he sees what's happening, no one believes him. And it has this impending sense of dread whilst at the same time being quite stylish, but never going to style over substance. And it's quite classic in the sense of the vampire and the girl who looks like his lost love. Chris Sarandon's a fantastic vampire in this. And there's the wonderful line where Peter Vincent holds up his cross and Chris Sarandon's vampire walks down and grabs it and says, "You've got to have faith for that to work on me." Just a fantastic line that reframes vampires. You know, the idea that crossing your fingers or holding two bits of wood together would fend off a vampire, which was quite prevalent back in the old Hammer films and others. And this reframes that. It's not the cross that is the thing that fends off the vampire. It's your faith. And I thought it was a nice little reinvention. Next is a tricky one. It was between The Howling and An American Werewolf in London. And I think I went for The Howling simply because it was probably the one I saw first. The Howling is quite slow-paced by comparison. And apparently that's because they had a minuscule budget to make it. But it was probably the first proper werewolf film I saw, beyond the classic ones and The Beast Must Die, which has a dog as a werewolf. This is proper werewolves. And you see a very visceral transformation. Personally, I think it's a better transformation than in American Werewolf in London, and that's probably why it's on the list. It's about a young reporter who becomes the target of a serial killer, and after surviving the attack, goes to a retreat, and it turns out not everything is what you think. As I say, the werewolf transformations are fantastic. It is slow paced, but as happens quite often with a low budget, the levels of imagination they have to go to achieve what they achieve is remarkable. Next up is the Lon Chaney Phantom of the Opera. This is such a gorgeous movie. A silent film based on the classic story. And it's just so visually stunning, so beautifully filmed. And it's weird, the juxtaposition of the Phantom of the Opera being silent, given the music should be such a large part of the story. The scene with the masquerade where he's coming down and the fear is tangible within everybody around him. And obviously the reveal, which everybody has seen, and the knowledge that he created that haunting, horrific visage in a very practical way. And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, they actually went through a lot of pain to contort his face in that way with wires and things. A brilliantly stunning, evocative, classic film. Next up is The Thing. I remember when I was at school, people talking about this film and being really interested in seeing it. Anyone who doesn't know, it's an Arctic station where they find a dog, and the dog is actually a creature that changes shape and absorbs people into it and can mimic anything and become people. It's been said many, many times, but it's a sense of paranoia and the mistrust in this small area where anybody could be this creature. And you have such brilliant scenes like the testing of the blood. But I think the reason this film really wins out is purely because of the practical special effects. They're just incredible and terrifying. The mind that thought some of those creatures up. I remember the first time I watched it, my mind was blown by how amazing it was. The spider head was actually taken out the second version, which was really frustrating because you saw the bit right before and then no spider head. That was in the days of lots of editing of films on television. Doesn't happen quite so much anymore. Get films that I used to watch late at night on a Saturday afternoon. But yeah, the practical visual effects, the sense of paranoia, claustrophobia, it's just brilliantly achieved. Another classic now, The Omen, the original, obviously. The story of the American ambassador to the UK who comes to believe that his son is the Antichrist. Quick spoiler, he is. Just such a clever film, and there's just this creeping sense of dread throughout it. There's nothing overt to start with. I think the first sense you get something's really, really wrong is when his nanny hangs herself, and there's quite a visceral scene. And the tension of the scene where he kills his mother. It's just a brilliantly tense, slow burn of a film that relies on great acting, great writing, and a sense of unease rather than flashes and bangs. So the last one, unless I decide to add any just as extras, because there's lots I could have put on this list, is the original Halloween, Story of an escaped psychopath who killed his sister when he was a child, and he stalks his hometown on Halloween. Classic film. Most people will probably know it, especially because there's been so many sequels and recent sequels ignoring all the others. To be honest with you, the first one was okay, the second one was terrible, and from what I hear, the third one's even worse. Often credited as being the film that started the slasher genre, although some will argue that Black Christmas actually started that. And it's all very heavily influenced by... I can never remember how to pronounce this one, so I'll put the words in the video. Again, it's a film that relies on tension, and music's incredible, and that really adds to the tone of it. Just to say, this is one of the few films in that time that ever actually scared me. None of the others on this list did. As much as I really enjoyed them, this is the only one that really scared me and gave me a bit of a sleepless night. Bearing in mind, I probably was 13, 12. I begged my parents to let me stay up and watch it, and then had a sleepless night. Yeah, it's the haunting nature of Michael Myers. The fact that he can be anywhere. All of the teenagers have personalities. They are people. And Michael Myers has been described by many as being like a shark. He is focused. There's no real explanation to his motivation. There's no expansion on who he is. It's one of the reasons the remake by Rob Zombie didn't work, because they explained why he was a psychopath. Didn't need explaining. You don't need to know why Michael Myers became what he is. You don't need to know he was a bullied child who killed animals. I don't care about that. I don't want to see his psychology. I know he's evil and he's a killer. I don't need to know why. Not knowing makes him more terrifying. Knowing why just makes him mundane. I say, great white shark, always moving forward, always looking for the next kill. No complications. No particularly deep emotions. Just going to the next kill. And that's quite terrifying. And others him in such a way that means that he's not relatable, and you don't want him to be relatable. There are probably so many more films I could have added to this list. Some of them are classics, some of them are probably on most people's lists, but I hope I've at least given you an idea of why I like them. And as I say, I really could go on with this list, but I'm going to leave it there. And thank you very much for listening. My comic is still available, and if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Peace out.